Hello and welcome back to our channel, where we explore the journey of caregiving and all the twists and turns that come along with it. I'm your host, Rosalie, and today we're diving into one of the most essential and often overlooked aspects of caregiving, financial planning. Now, if you're a caregiver, you already know that the emotional and physical tolls of caregiving are significant. But what about the financial side of things? Many of us don't realize how much managing finances, both for ourselves and for our aging loved ones, can impact our daily lives, whether it's covering the cost of home care, navigating Medicaid, or ensuring our parents' assets are protected. Financial planning is a critical part of caregiving that deserves our attention. In today's episode, we'll be covering everything from free services available to seniors and caregivers to the tricky task of taking over your parents' finances. We'll talk about warning signs that your loved one's finances might be off track and strategies for protecting family assets from things like Medicaid estate recovery. And of course, we'll also discuss how to pay for long-term care, whether it's assisted living or nursing homes, because, let's face it, care costs add up fast. Whether you're just starting your caregiving journey or you've been at it for years, this episode will help you navigate the often complex financial side of caregiving with more confidence and clarity. So, grab a cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dig into some really important tips that can make a world of difference for you and your loved ones. Pause, gentle music. Stay with us because we're just getting started. Rosalie talks in calm, engaging voice. All right, let's kick things off with something that can really help lighten the load: free services and support for both seniors and caregivers. This is such an important piece of the puzzle because, as caregivers, we're often juggling so much, emotionally, physically, and of course, financially. But here's the good news. There are many services out there that are either free or offered at a low cost that can make a huge difference. Now, some of these services might be right in your local community, but there are also national programs designed to provide support. Let's start with transportation services. One of the biggest challenges for many older adults is getting to and from medical appointments or running errands. In many areas, there are free or low-cost transportation options for seniors. Programs like Dial a Ride or other local senior transit services are designed specifically to help older adults maintain their independence without the cost of a private car service or taxi. Another big one is meal programs. Many communities offer Meals on Wheels, which provides nutritious meals delivered directly to the homes of seniors who may have difficulty cooking or shopping for themselves. This can be a huge help for caregivers who may not always be available to prepare meals or worry about their loved one's nutrition. Not only is this service often free or donation-based, but it also ensures that our loved ones are getting well-balanced meals every day. Let's not forget about legal aid services. There are a lot of legal complexities involved in caregiving, everything from setting up powers of attorney to estate planning. Many states and local communities offer free legal clinics for seniors where you can get advice on how to handle these sensitive matters. Having access to these resources without the financial strain of hiring a lawyer can really ease some of the stress involved in managing the legal aspects of caregiving. Beyond these, there are also support groups and counselling services specifically for caregivers. These can be incredibly beneficial because, as we know, caregiving can feel isolating. Sometimes, having a group of people who truly understand what you're going through can make all the difference. And many of these groups are free or supported by organisations dedicated to elder care, like the Alzheimer's Association or local area agencies on ageing. All of these services are designed to help ease the financial burden on families. If we can rely on free transportation, meals, and legal support, that frees up resources for other expenses like medical care, home modifications, or even just giving ourselves a little breathing room. The key is to do a little digging. Your local Department of Aging, community centres, and even senior healthcare providers can point you in the direction of services you might not even know exist. I always say, don't be afraid to ask. There's often more support out there than we realise, and every little bit helps. This reminds me of Jane, a widow who lost her financial security trying to help her family. After her husband passed away, she inherited a modest insurance sum, providing her with a sense of stability for her future. However, over the years, as her daughter and grandsons faced various financial struggles, Jane repeatedly loaned them portions of her inheritance, assuming they would repay her when they were back on their feet. But despite her family's eventual financial recovery, the promised repayments never materialized. Now, over a decade later, Jane has used up her savings and faces financial insecurity as she navigates her own retirement years. She realizes that, had she been aware of free resources available to seniors, like transportation services, home repairs, and even legal advice, she might have avoided some of the financial strain and maintained more of her independence. Jane's story reminds us of the importance of exploring available resources before relying solely on personal savings, especially for those on fixed incomes. If you're feeling the financial weight of caregiving, consider tapping into community resources that can help alleviate some costs. They may not solve every challenge, but they can certainly make the journey a bit easier and more secure. So, if you're finding yourself overwhelmed by the cost of caregiving, start by tapping into these free resources. They may not solve every problem, but they can certainly lighten the load and make the journey a bit easier for both you and your loved one. All right, coming up next, we'll talk about what to do when it's time to take over your parents' finances. A step that can be emotionally and financially challenging, but one that many caregivers eventually face. Stick with us. Let's move on to something that can feel like a delicate and sometimes daunting task: taking over your parents' finances. This is one of the biggest transitions many of us face as caregivers. When you start managing someone else's finances, especially a parent's, it's not just about the numbers, it's about trust, responsibility, and quite frankly, navigating some emotional waters. First, let me say that if you're facing this challenge right now, you are not alone. Many of us find ourselves in a position where our parents are no longer able to manage their finances effectively, and it's up to us to step in. Whether it's due to cognitive decline, physical limitations, or just the complexities of aging, this transition can be tricky, but it's an important step in ensuring their well-being. So, let's talk about how to make this transition as smooth as possible. One of the first and most critical steps is getting the right documents in place. When you start managing someone else's finances, especially in a legal capacity, you need to be empowered to do so. This means getting documents like a power of attorney, POA, in place. A POA is essential because it legally authorizes you to make financial decisions on your parents' behalf. Without it, you could run into roadblocks when dealing with banks, creditors, or even filing taxes. There are different types of POAs. Some give you authority immediately, while others, called springing POAs, only kick in under certain conditions, like when your parent becomes incapacitated. You'll want to work with an attorney to decide which type makes the most sense for your situation. Another key document to have is a living will or an advance directive. While this deals more with healthcare decisions, it often goes hand in hand with financial management. If your parent is in a situation where they can no longer communicate their wishes, a living will ensures that you know their preferences for medical care, which can also affect financial decisions, like how to allocate funds for long-term care or hospice services. Once you have these documents in place, the next big step is open communication. And let me tell you, this is where things can get a bit tough emotionally. For many older adults, their finances are tied to their sense of independence and dignity. They might feel embarrassed, resistant, or even defensive about handing over control. This is totally natural. Imagine how you would feel if the roles were reversed. So, my advice is to approach the conversation with compassion and patience. Start by framing it as a team effort. You're not trying to take control. You're trying to help them manage things in a way that will best protect their future and reduce any stress they might be feeling. Sometimes, it helps to start small. Offer to help with one task, maybe paying bills online or organizing their paperwork, and build from there as trust grows. It's also important to be transparent about your intentions and the steps you're taking. Keep them in the loop about decisions, involve them as much as they're able, and explain why certain choices are being made. If they're hesitant, maybe bring in a trusted third party, like their financial advisor or attorney, who can help reassure them that you're acting in their best interest. And here's a tip: don't wait until a crisis hits. The earlier you start these conversations, the smoother the process will be. If you wait until your parent is no longer able to make decisions or manage things on their own, it can create unnecessary stress for everyone involved. Early planning gives you both time to adjust and make informed decisions together. Now, once you're officially managing their finances, make sure you keep everything well documented. Set up a system for organizing their bank statements, bills, and any other financial paperwork. If they don't already have one, consider creating a budget to track expenses and ensure that they're living within their means, especially if long-term care costs are on the horizon. It's also a good idea to review any existing insurance policies, life, health, long-term care, or even home insurance. Make sure everything is up to date and that you understand what's covered and what isn't. This can prevent unpleasant surprises down the line. Taking over your parents' finances is a significant responsibility, but with the right preparation and approach, it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Remember, you're not just managing their money, you're helping to protect their well-being and ensure that their final years are lived with dignity and security. Next up, we're going to talk about how to recognize warning signs that your loved one's finances might already be off track and what to do about it. You won't want to miss this, so stay tuned. So, we've talked about taking over finances and the steps to prepare, but how do you know when it's time to step in? In this segment, we're going to look at the warning signs that your parents' finances might already be off track. It's not always obvious, but there are certain red flags you can look out for to make sure your loved one isn't struggling more than they're letting on. One of the most common signs is missed or late bills. If you visit your parents' home and see unopened bills piling up, or they start getting calls from creditors, that's a big indication something is wrong. For many older adults, managing mail and paperwork can become overwhelming, and sometimes they just stop dealing with it altogether. This can lead to services being cut off, like utilities, or worse, falling behind on mortgage or rent payments. Alongside that, unopened mail can be a major sign that they're avoiding something financially stressful. Maybe they've received bank statements or notices that they don't want to face. If you're seeing a stack of letters that haven't been touched, especially if they're from banks or creditors, that's a clear signal that something's being ignored. Take a peek at the envelopes. Are they from unfamiliar creditors, collection agencies, or even the IRS? That's when you know it's time to intervene. This reminds me of Sarah's story. She started helping her mother with day-to-day tasks and soon discovered a deeper problem. Her mother hadn't opened her mail in months, and worse yet, she hadn't filed taxes in over a decade. Sarah also found expired checks buried under piles of unopened envelopes. The moment she saw this, she knew she had to step in and take control before things spiraled any further. Sarah was able to secure a power of attorney and begin sorting out her mother's finances, preventing a potential financial disaster. Her story is a powerful example of how noticing something as simple as unopened mail can be the key to catching financial mismanagement early. Another red flag is unusual bank transactions. This could be large withdrawals that don't seem to make sense or even small recurring charges that they can't explain. Sometimes older adults fall victim to scams or telemarketing schemes without even realizing it. Scammers tend to target the elderly because they can be more trusting and less tech-savvy. If you're noticing a lot of unexplained transactions or they suddenly become secretive about their finances, it's time to dig deeper. Uncharacteristic spending habits are another thing to watch for. For example, if your parent has always been frugal, but now they're suddenly buying expensive things or donating large sums of money to charities they don't know much about, that could be a sign of financial mismanagement or even cognitive decline. Sometimes, impulse buying or being easily swayed by advertisements can be a symptom of early dementia or just general confusion. Julia's experience is a great example of why paying attention to property maintenance and insurance is crucial. When she took over her father's finances, she discovered that the family home didn't have homeowners insurance and was in need of significant repairs. Without insurance, the house couldn't be sold, and holding on to it was eating up time and money they didn't have. Julia realized too late how critical it was to stay on top of these financial responsibilities before her father's health declined. Her situation highlights the importance of checking for unpaid insurance premiums and keeping property matters in order before emergencies arise. So, what should you do if you start noticing these red flags? The first step is to approach the conversation carefully. Like we talked about earlier, finances are a sensitive topic for many older adults, and the last thing you want is for your parent to feel like you're accusing them or taking away their independence. Start by asking gentle questions about their routine. Hey Mum, I noticed a couple of bills on the table. Do you need any help organising those? Or, Dad, I've been helping out a lot with the finances lately. Would it be helpful if I took a look at your bank statements just to make sure everything's in order? Sometimes it helps to frame it as wanting to ensure their financial security so they can continue living comfortably without any surprises. Position yourself as someone who's there to support them, not take over. If they're resistant, it can be helpful to explain that everyone needs a little help now and then, especially as things get more complex with age. Once you have a clearer picture, it's time to take some practical steps. If bills are being missed, you can set up automatic payments for things like utilities, insurance, or mortgages. This takes some of the burden off your parents' shoulders and ensures that nothing falls through the cracks. You can also ask their bank if they offer tools like account alerts, which will notify you if unusual activity occurs, such as large withdrawals or overdrafts. In the case of scams or identity theft, don't hesitate to contact their bank or credit card company to report suspicious transactions and even set up fraud protection. If the situation is serious, you might need to go so far as to freeze their credit to prevent further damage. Of course, all of this can be a little overwhelming, especially if you've just realized that your parents' finances are in trouble. But remember, it's better to catch these issues early than to wait until things spiral out of control. The sooner you intervene, the easier it will be to protect your parents' financial future, and by extension, their overall well-being. Next up, we're going to dive into some specific strategies for financial planning that can help you manage both your parents' needs and your own. It's all about staying ahead of the game and being prepared. Stay tuned. In this segment, we're diving into something essential for all caregivers: financial planning strategies, not just for your parents, but also for you as a caregiver. Taking care of an aging loved one involves more than just emotional and physical support. It comes with its own set of financial responsibilities, and if we're not careful, those can sneak up on us. So, how do you plan financially, not only to cover caregiving costs, but to protect your own financial future as well? Let's break it down. First and foremost, you need a clear sense of the costs involved in caregiving. This might include home modifications, such as installing handrails, ramps, or even making the bathroom more accessible. These costs can add up quickly, and they're often not covered by insurance. If you're planning to keep your parent at home, it's crucial to budget for these improvements up front. Next are medical bills. Even with Medicare or private insurance, there are often co-pays, prescription costs, and other out-of-pocket expenses. It's helpful to track these costs monthly so you can identify patterns and plan accordingly. Consider using budgeting apps or spreadsheets specifically for caregiving expenses to stay organized. Finally, one of the biggest costs for many families is long-term care, which can include anything from in-home aides to assisted living or nursing home care. According to recent studies, the average cost of assisted living is around $4,000 to $6,000 per month, while nursing homes can be even more expensive. If this type of care is on the horizon, now is the time to start planning for it. Look into long-term care insurance, which can help cover these costs. But keep in mind that policies become more expensive the older you get, and not everyone will qualify. If your parent is relatively healthy, it might be worth considering sooner rather than later. Let me share Hope's story. Her mother's spending habits spiraled out of control after her father passed away. She became addicted to buying from the QVC home shopping network, making purchase after purchase without considering the financial consequences. Despite Hope's efforts to step in and help manage her mother's finances, her mother was resistant, insisting that she could handle it. Hope's story is a reminder of how caregiving can unexpectedly become financially burdensome, especially when our loved ones' spending habits change. This is why budgeting and setting realistic financial boundaries is so crucial when caregiving. If you're able to, it's smart to develop an investment strategy that helps cover both your parents' expenses and keeps your own financial goals on track. One thing to keep in mind is that caregiving often means caregivers reduce their work hours or leave the workforce entirely, which can hurt their savings, especially retirement accounts like 401k or IRAs. To combat this, make sure you're continuing to invest in tax-advantaged retirement accounts as much as possible. Even if you have to cut back on work, try to contribute something each month. For example, if you're married, your spouse can contribute to a spousal IRA to help keep your retirement savings growing. If your parent has savings or investments, it may be time to review their investment portfolio with a financial advisor to ensure it's structured to support their care needs. Typically, older adults shift their investments to more conservative assets like bonds to preserve capital, but with the rising costs of care, it might be worth having a portion of their portfolio in assets that still offer growth potential, like dividend-paying stocks or conservative mutual funds. Insurance is another critical component of a sound financial plan. We already touched on long-term care insurance, but don't forget about health insurance. If your parent is on Medicare, it's essential to understand what is and isn't covered. For example, Medicare typically doesn't cover custodial care, which is the day-to-day help with things like bathing, dressing, or eating, services you might need to hire someone for. You might also want to explore Medicare Advantage or supplemental insurance policies to fill the gaps that traditional Medicare doesn't cover. These policies can help cover prescription drug costs, specialist visits, and other out-of-pocket medical expenses. For caregivers themselves, it's a good idea to make sure you have adequate disability insurance and life insurance. If caregiving requires you to cut back on work or potentially stop working, having a safety net in place for yourself is just as important as caring for your parent. This part can feel tricky because it sometimes seems like a juggling act. As caregivers, we tend to focus on the immediate needs of our loved ones, but it's crucial to continue saving for your own future as well. Start by setting up a dual saving strategy, one fund for caregiving expenses and another for your own financial goals. Consider opening a health savings account, HSA, if you're eligible. HSAs are tax-advantaged accounts that allow you to save specifically for medical expenses, and the best part is that funds roll over year to year. If you're spending a lot on healthcare for your parent, this can be a helpful way to offset some of those costs while still keeping money set aside for your own medical needs in the future. Carmen's experience highlights the importance of saving for unexpected caregiving costs. Her mother, who had always been generous, began donating large sums of money to obscure charities after her cognitive abilities declined. Carmen was shocked to discover that her mother had spent over $7,000 on donations and had started dipping into her retirement savings to cover her expenses. Carmen stepped in just in time to save what was left of her mother's savings. Stories like these show why it's crucial to plan ahead and set aside funds for both caregiving and your future. Lastly, don't overlook the importance of building an emergency fund. Unexpected expenses, like a sudden hospitalization or needing extra in-home care, can throw even the most well-thought-out financial plans into chaos. Having 3 to 6 months' worth of expenses saved up in an emergency fund will give you a buffer when those unexpected situations arise. At the end of the day, the goal of financial planning as a caregiver is to strike a balance between caring for your parent while ensuring your own financial well-being. By creating a clear budget, investing wisely, reviewing insurance options, and saving for the future, you'll not only help secure your parents' comfort, but also your own peace of mind. Remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay to reach out to a financial planner or elder care attorney. They can help guide you through the complexities of caregiving costs and protect your family's financial future. Up next, we'll talk about Medicaid and how to protect family assets while ensuring your loved one gets the care they need. Stay tuned. Now that we've touched on the basics of financial planning, we need to dive into something that can be a little more complex: Medicaid. Understanding how Medicaid works is crucial if your loved one might need long-term care, especially when it comes to protecting family assets. In this segment, we're going to talk about Medicaid's asset limits, strategies to protect those assets, and what's called Medicaid estate recovery, which can affect your family's inheritance down the line. Medicaid's asset limits, what you need to know. Medicaid is a lifeline for many families who can't afford long-term care costs out of pocket. But to qualify for Medicaid, there are strict asset limits. In most states, an individual can only have about $2,000 in countable assets to qualify for Medicaid, while a married couple's limit is often around $3,000. These limits include things like cash, savings, investments, and even additional real estate. However, certain assets are exempt, like a primary residence up to a certain value, one car, and personal belongings. This is where many families run into concerns, because if your parent has more than the asset limit, they'll need to spend down their assets to qualify for Medicaid. Spending down means they'll need to use their savings and assets to pay for care until they meet the eligibility requirements. And while that sounds straightforward, it can quickly drain the resources they've worked hard to build. But here's where we can apply some strategies to protect their money while still qualifying for Medicaid. Strategies to protect assets. The good news is there are legitimate ways to protect family assets and still meet Medicaid's requirements. One strategy is the use of Medicaid-compliant annuities. These are financial products that convert a lump sum of money into an income stream for your parent, essentially taking that money out of the countable assets category and allowing it to be used for their care over time. Another option is placing assets into a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, MAPT. This is an irrevocable trust, which means once you place assets in it, they are no longer owned by your parent and thus don't count toward Medicaid's asset limits. However, timing is everything with this strategy. Medicaid has a 5-year look-back period, which means they review any financial transactions made in the 5 years before applying for Medicaid. If they find that your parent gave away money or transferred assets to avoid the spend down, there could be penalties, and their application could be delayed. Another strategy to consider is caregiver agreements. In these agreements, your parent can pay you, as their caregiver, for your services, but this needs to be done legally and carefully documented. The payments must be reasonable for the services provided, and there should be a formal written contract in place. This way, instead of gifting money, which Medicaid might penalise, your parent is compensating you for the care you provide, and the payments don't count against the asset limits. For married couples, there are even more options to explore. In many cases, spousal protection rules allow the healthy spouse, often called the community spouse, to keep more assets, such as the family home and retirement accounts, without affecting the Medicaid eligibility of the spouse in need of care. Medicaid estate recovery, what it means for your family. Now let's talk about Medicaid estate recovery, something that's often not well understood, but can have a big impact on your family's inheritance. Here's how it works. Once a person who has been receiving Medicaid benefits for long-term care passes away, Medicaid may seek to recover the money they spent on that person's care from their estate. This is called Medicaid estate recovery. It usually applies to assets that were exempt while your parent was alive, such as the family home. In other words, Medicaid won't force your parent to sell their home while they're living to qualify for care. But once they've passed, the state can place a claim on the home's value to recoup some of the costs. This can come as a shock to families, especially if they were planning to inherit the home or other assets. The state typically won't pursue estate recovery if there's a surviving spouse living in the home, or if there's a disabled or minor child still residing there. But once the home is no longer needed by those protected individuals, the state may step in to claim what's owed. There are, however, ways to plan for this. One option is to sell the home before your parent applies for Medicaid and use the proceeds in a way that helps meet Medicaid eligibility requirements, such as purchasing a Medicaid-compliant annuity or spending down on legitimate expenses. Alternatively, placing the home into a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust at least 5 years before applying for Medicaid can shield it from estate recovery. This ensures the home can be passed on to heirs without being claimed by the state. Let's bring this to life with a few real stories. Joanne's experience protecting the family home from Medicaid recovery. Joanne's family faced this very issue when her father's health deteriorated and long-term care became inevitable. Worried about losing the family home, which had been passed down for generations, Joanne consulted an elder care attorney. The attorney recommended a life estate deed, which allowed her father to live in the house for the rest of his life, while ensuring that the property would automatically pass to Joanne and her siblings after his death, bypassing probate and Medicaid recovery. Though the family had to manage the costs of maintaining the property, they successfully protected the home from Medicaid estate recovery and preserved it for future generations. But not all stories have such a happy ending. The New Jersey family's rude awakening. A family in New Jersey learned about Medicaid recovery the hard way, after their father was placed in a nursing home and the daughter moved in to care for her mother. They thought the house would stay in the family. However, after both parents passed away, Medicaid placed a lien on the property to recover the costs of the parents' care. The daughter, believing she would inherit the house, was devastated to learn that Medicaid had the legal right to sell it. This painful lesson highlighted the importance of consulting an elder law attorney before it's too late. A frightening letter from Medicaid. Chris and his family also faced the harsh reality of Medicaid recovery when they received a letter demanding $22,000 just 10 months after his father's passing. The family had cared for their father at home, never expecting to owe anything to Medicaid as he had no assets. Despite submitting a letter explaining the situation, they were left in limbo, anxiously waiting for confirmation that the debt would be forgiven. Their story illustrates how important it is to understand the financial ramifications of Medicaid, even when you think your loved one had little to no assets. Closing thoughts on Medicaid planning. Planning for Medicaid and protecting family assets can feel overwhelming, especially with all the rules and nuances. But with early planning and the right legal strategies, you can help your parent qualify for the care they need without losing everything they've worked for. If you're unsure about which approach is best for your family, it's wise to consult with an elder law attorney or a Medicaid planning specialist. They can guide you through the process, help you avoid costly mistakes, and ensure that your parents' financial legacy is preserved. Coming up, we'll talk about the various ways to pay for assisted living or nursing home care without draining all of your resources. Stick with us for some more tips that could make a world of difference. So far, we've covered the importance of financial planning and protecting assets when dealing with Medicaid. But now it's time to dive into one of the most significant financial concerns: paying for assisted living and nursing home care. Whether you're navigating these decisions now or planning for the future, the costs can be overwhelming. But with the right knowledge, you can find the best solution for your family's situation. How to pay for assisted living? Let's start by discussing assisted living. The average cost typically ranges from $4,000 to $6,000 per month, covering housing, meals, and some assistance with daily activities like bathing and medication management. But how can families afford these expenses? Most families start with private pay using personal assets like savings or proceeds from selling a home. While this method works initially, it can deplete resources quickly. A more structured option is long-term care insurance. If your parent has a policy, it's designed specifically to cover assisted living and other long-term care services. However, many people don't have these policies because they can be expensive and must be purchased well in advance, sometimes decades before care is needed. Another option to explore is life insurance with long-term care riders. Some policies allow you to access the death benefit early to pay for care, reducing the final payout but providing much-needed funds in the short term. Jewel Davis's story, the financial struggle for assisted living. Let me share a story that truly highlights the challenges caregivers face. Jewel had been caring for her mother, who lived with her for 3 years as dementia worsened. Her mother's symptoms, including frequent sundowning episodes, became overwhelming, especially since Jewel had no siblings to help. Medical professionals and social workers advised that her mother would be better off in an assisted living facility, where she could receive 24/7 care and participate in activities that Jewel couldn't manage alone. However, the financial hurdle was immense. Her mother's only income was Social Security, which wasn't enough to cover most assisted living facilities. Despite feeling defeated, Jewel contacted local agencies like the Aging Adults Agency, her mother's, and her social workers to find a solution. She eventually found a facility that provided quality care within her mother's financial limits, lifting an enormous weight off her shoulders. Jewel could finally focus on being a daughter again and caring for her health, rather than being a full-time caregiver. This story underscores the importance of persistence and resourcefulness in finding affordable care options. There are agencies and resources out there to help, whether it's social services, veterans benefits, or financial aid. Paying for nursing home care and Medicaid eligibility. Now let's move on to nursing home care, which can cost anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 per month. For many families, this is a daunting expense, but Medicaid can help cover these costs, if you qualify. Medicaid has strict asset and income limits. Generally, a person can only have about $2,000 in countable assets to qualify, though some assets like the family home or one car are exempt. If your parent has more than the allowed assets, Medicaid requires a spend down on qualified expenses, like paying off debt or prepaying funeral costs. Once their assets fall below the threshold, they can apply for Medicaid coverage. A story of financial abuse, understanding Medicaid and protecting assets. One listener found herself in a difficult situation when her mother's trustee began mismanaging assets, even committing financial elder abuse. The trustee told her that her mother had to go into a nursing home on Medicare, potentially risking her mother's home. Unsure of what to do, she sought help from an elder law attorney and Adult Protective Services, APS. This step was crucial in stopping the financial abuse and ensuring her mother's assets were protected. This story highlights why it's so important to be proactive in protecting family assets and understanding the financial implications of Medicaid. If you suspect financial elder abuse, reach out to an elder law attorney or APS for help. The earlier you act, the better the outcome for your loved one's well-being and financial security. Final thoughts on paying for long-term care. Paying for assisted living or nursing home care is one of the biggest challenges families face. But with proper planning, whether through private pay, long-term care insurance, Medicaid, or life insurance, you can help ensure your loved one receives the care they need without draining all their resources. Make sure to review all financial options available to your parent and consult with a financial advisor or elder law attorney to navigate the complexities of long-term care planning. Early planning can make all the difference. Coming up, we'll talk about the employment and financial implications of caregiving and explore the question many caregivers face: Should you quit your job to care for your elderly parent? Stay tuned for more on that after the break. In this next segment, we're going to dive into a deeply personal and practical question that many caregivers face. Should you quit your job to care for your elderly parent? It's a decision that weighs heavily, and it can feel like you're caught between the needs of your loved one and your own financial future. Today, we'll explore the pros and cons of stepping away from work to become a full-time caregiver, and we'll also look at how you might be able to receive compensation if you take on that role. Should you quit your job to become a full-time caregiver? Let's start with the decision itself. Quitting your job to become a caregiver can seem like the right thing to do, especially if your parents' care needs are increasing and outside help is either too expensive or doesn't feel personal enough. Take Susan, for example. A former globetrotter with a successful career, she found herself in an unexpected journey when her husband, Michael, became seriously ill. Their plans for a shared retirement full of adventure vanished, and Susan had to make the difficult decision to leave her career and become his full-time caregiver. Her world of travel was replaced with daily routines, and while her love for Michael kept her going, she couldn't help but feel trapped. The financial and emotional cost weighed heavily on her, making her question, is this all there is now? On the pro side, leaving your job gives you the ability to focus entirely on your loved one's well-being. You can personally ensure that their care aligns with your values and that their needs are met consistently, as was the case for Mark. After recovering from his own back injury, Mark found himself balancing the care of both parents after they suffered strokes. Juggling their complex medical needs, especially his mother's worsening diabetes and memory issues, was incredibly demanding. Like Susan, he found fulfillment in knowing his care made a difference. However, he also struggled with his own financial future, wondering if stepping away from work was sustainable. The financial and emotional costs. However, the emotional and financial toll of caregiving is real. Karen, a full-time worker, experienced this firsthand. Her aging father's declining health left her torn between her job and her responsibilities as his caregiver. Leaving him alone for long hours felt dangerous, but losing her income wasn't an option either. As Karen looked into programs like Medicaid for potential compensation, she quickly found that the application process was overwhelming, leaving her feeling lost and stretched too thin. If you leave your job, you face not only the loss of income, but also the loss of benefits like health insurance, paid time off, and retirement savings. Without these, you may have to dip into savings, leaving you financially vulnerable. Additionally, stepping away from your career can make it hard to re-enter the workforce later. Skills can become outdated, and there may be gaps in your resume that employers question. Something that Susan now worries about as she contemplates her future beyond caregiving. The good news is, in some cases, you can receive compensation for caregiving. Mark, who had devoted himself to caring for his brother Jonathan in hospice, was also exploring how to receive financial support. His dedication was unwavering, but he struggled to make ends meet. Like Mark, caregivers can seek compensation through various programs. One option is Medicaid's Cash and Counseling program, which allows Medicaid recipients to direct funds toward paying family members for caregiving services. This includes assistance with personal care, such as bathing, dressing, and meal preparation. However, availability and eligibility vary by state, so check with your local Medicaid office. Veterans and their families may also find help through the Veterans Administration. Programs like the VA Aid and Attendance Benefit can provide financial support for in-home care, including paying family caregivers. This could be a lifeline for caregivers like Mark, who might be able to access veteran benefits for his father, Robert, who served in the military. Some states offer home and community-based services, HCBS waivers, allowing Medicaid recipients to hire family members as caregivers. Each state has different regulations, so it's important to research what's available where you live. If your loved one has the financial means, creating a private care agreement could be another solution. For example, In Karen's situation, her father could use his savings to pay her for the care she's providing. This type of agreement should include a written contract that outlines your duties, hours, and pay, which can also protect against future Medicaid issues. Having this in place can help prevent the payments from being viewed as gifts, which could impact Medicaid eligibility later. If you're not ready to completely leave your job, part-time work or remote options might be worth exploring. Many employers have become more flexible in recent years, and this could allow you to balance caregiving with maintaining your career. For Mark, this option would have allowed him to continue contributing financially while caring for both parents, offering some relief from the pressure of leaving the workforce entirely. Additionally, don't forget about respite care, short-term relief for primary caregivers. This could give you the break you need to either continue working part-time or simply recharge, as Susan longed to do while caring for Michael. Respite care is often offered through community centres or senior services organisations. The decision to quit your job to care for a loved one is deeply personal and requires careful consideration of both the financial and emotional aspects. As Susan, Mark, and Karen's stories illustrate, it's not a choice to be taken lightly, but there are resources out there. Whether through government programs, veteran benefits, or private care agreements, there are ways to navigate this complex and often overwhelming journey. Remember, no matter what choice you make, you're not alone. There are communities and resources that can support you, helping you balance caregiving with your own financial and emotional well-being. Next, we'll wrap up this series with a look at special financial aid for veterans, an often overlooked source of support for families caring for aging veterans. Stay tuned for that right after this. In this final segment, we're focusing on a valuable resource that many families might not fully explore: special financial aid for veterans. If your loved one is a veteran, there are several benefits and programs available that can help ease the financial burden of long-term care. Whether it's in-home assistance, assisted living, or even nursing home care. Let's start with the basics. Veterans who served during a period of war and meet certain age or disability requirements may qualify for veterans' pension benefits. This needs-based benefit provides monthly payments to wartime veterans with limited or no income. The amount of the pension depends on the veteran's financial situation, including their income and assets, as well as their family status. But here's what many people don't know: veterans' pension can be increased if the veteran is housebound or requires regular assistance for daily tasks, like bathing or dressing. This brings us to one of the most important financial support programs available for veterans in need of long-term care. The Aid and Attendance (ANA) benefit is an addition to the basic veterans' pension and can make a substantial difference in covering care costs. Veterans who qualify receive additional monthly payments on top of their pension. To be eligible for ANA, a veteran must meet at least one of the following criteria: require help with daily living activities such as dressing, feeding, bathing, or managing medications. Be bedridden due to illness. Be a patient in a nursing home due to physical or mental incapacity, including dementia. Have limited eyesight. Take Bob, for instance. Bob, a Vietnam veteran, never saw direct combat, but he was stationed at an overseas base, always prepared to serve. Years later, as his health declined, he discovered that he wasn't eligible for many of the benefits available to combat veterans. Frustrated, Bob couldn't understand why veterans like him were excluded from receiving the same aid. If a war had started, I would have fought like everyone else, he thought. Bob spent years fighting with the VA, trying to prove his need for assistance, but the bureaucratic system seemed designed to block him. Eventually, he realized he needed legal help just to navigate the confusing VA benefits maze. It felt unjust. He had served, yet the benefits he needed were just out of reach. But for those who persist, the ANA benefit can provide significant financial relief, covering costs like in-home caregivers, assisted living, or nursing home care. In addition to aid and attendance, Veterans who are largely confined to their homes due to disability may qualify for the homebound benefit. While similar to A&A, the homebound benefit is for veterans who don't need full-time care but still require assistance because of limited mobility or health. This benefit offers extra financial support, which can go toward in-home care or modifications to make the home more accessible. Martha's experience highlights the importance of understanding these benefits. Martha was overwhelmed. Her father, a veteran of both World War II and the Korean War, had been suffering from Alzheimer's, and she desperately needed assistance. She visited the local Veterans Service Centre, hoping to get help navigating the aid and attendance benefit for her father. All she left with was a checklist of documents and a lot of conflicting information. Some representatives told her one thing about her father's assets, while others said the opposite. Confused and frustrated, Martha turned to an elder law attorney, who assured her that they could help streamline the process. Her persistence paid off, but Martha couldn't shake the feeling that she should have been able to rely on the VA for accurate information in the first place. Another vital resource for families is the Veteran-Directed Care Program. This program allows veterans to manage their own care through a monthly budget. Veterans can use this money to hire family members, including adult children, as caregivers or to pay for services like meal delivery, transportation, or home health aides. This flexibility lets families tailor care to their specific needs without stretching their finances. For Paul, this program could have been a lifeline. Paul had been taking care of his brother John ever since John returned from military service. John's health deteriorated after years of living with PTSD and other service-related conditions. Paul took on the role of full-time caregiver, handling everything from meals to medication. Though John qualified for some care through the VA, the 10 hours a week of assistance they offered barely scratched the surface of what was needed. Paul tried to research additional programs, but it seemed like no one could point him in the right direction. The financial and emotional strain was immense, and Paul was left wondering if there were any other benefits they weren't being told about. For caregivers like Paul, the Veteran-Directed Care Program can make all the difference, offering both financial relief and emotional support. But the system seemed designed to keep these solutions hidden. Anyway, applying for veterans' benefits can be a bit complex, but the Veterans Administration provides resources to help you through the process. You can apply for veterans' pension, aid and attendance, and other benefits by contacting the VA or working with a Veterans Service Organization, VSO. These organizations, like Disabled American Veterans, DAVE, or the American Legion, can help file claims and navigate the paperwork, ensuring you get the benefits you deserve. Additionally, the VA's Geriatrics and Extended Care Program offers services like home health care, respite care, and adult day health care programs. These are designed to help veterans stay in their homes for as long as possible or transition to a care facility when necessary, giving families the support they need. If your parent or loved one is a veteran, these programs and benefits can provide crucial financial support, helping to cover the costs of caregiving and long-term care. From veterans' pension to the aid and attendance and homebound benefits, the financial aid available can significantly reduce the burden on families. Don't hesitate to explore these resources and get assistance from a veterans service organization to ensure you're accessing all the benefits your family is entitled to. That brings us to the end of today's episode. We've covered a lot of ground in this series, from managing your parents' finances to protecting family assets, navigating Medicaid, and exploring special financial support for veterans. I hope this has given you the tools and confidence to tackle the financial side of caregiving, knowing that you're not alone and there are resources out there to help you on this journey. If you found today's episode helpful, please consider sharing it with other caregivers in your life or leaving a review. And as always, if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please comment below. This is your host, Rosalie. We'll see you in the next episode.